And speaking of borders, one of the absolute truths about Each Way Albo becoming Prime Minister is that Kristina Keneally would end up being elevated to the person in charge of our borders. Now, if you think you've heard me sing this song before, you're right, but I have a slightly different version of it tonight. No, I'm not talking about when Kristina Keneally was meeting with members of United Front. Remember the people who believe that Taiwan is part of China? She's unapologetic about that. Instead, I want to talk about an absolute clanger that she dropped on the Australian people today, but hoped nobody would notice. It was during an interview with my colleague Andrew Cornell, who was hosting Afternoon Agenda today. She thought she got away with it, but I saw it, and she didn't. Because you see, as you know, in the years after the Howard government, boat policy in Australia changed. As I told you over the years, I was one of those people who thought that we had effectively dealt with this problem by 2007. So why not open the door to being a little bit more compassionate? I was wrong. Because the reality is, as you know, the number of boats that arrived in Australia went through the roof, along with the number of people who came with them. We had a look at a report today, which was released by the Australian Parliamentary Library, about boat arrivals since 1976. And the numbers speak for themselves. Between 2002 and 2007, there were just 18 boats that arrived in Australia, carrying 288 people and crews. Once compassion won the day, between 2008 and 2013, 744 boats carrying 44,000 people arrived in the country. It was only after Tony Abbott came to power, Scott Morrison was the immigration minister, that we turned back boats and we stopped the tide. But a key part of the operation that has meant that virtually bugger all boats have arrived of recent years is because of what happened to the people who ended up in our detention centres. While many of those people are no longer physically in detention, they're on a thing called a temporary protection visa. Put simply, they remain in a form of legal limbo. They don't have anywhere near full citizenship. Now remember, Kevin Rudd said that the plan to turn back boats that Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison had in 2013 was apparently going to provoke us to a war with Indonesia. And in the years since, the hard left of the Labor Party have never wanted to accept that as the way to stop the boats, which doesn't just stop people coming here illegally, it saves lives. Thousands of people died trying to get to this country by boat. The worst example, of course, was when a boat crashed off the edge of Christmas Island, and we saw with our own eyes the consequences of this trade. But even then, years after that incident, the left of the Labor Party did not want to support that policy. And the man who now seeks to be the Prime Minister of Australia was the one who voted against that policy. He wanted the Labor Party not to change its rules because he believed, as you've just read on screen, that he wouldn't want to ask somebody to do something that he couldn't. But after Bill Shorten was able to successfully get the Labor Party to close this very obvious loophole, Anthony Albanese sang a different tune. He now says that it was an error when it comes to boat turnbacks. An error? The consequence of not turning back boats resulted in, as I said, 40,000 people, 44,000 people coming into the country illegally, and hundreds of boats who knew that they wouldn't be turned back. So what changed? Apart from the party line, what does Anthony Albanese actually think when it comes to turnbacks? Now, he'll tell you now, just as Kevin Rudd did in 2007, that, oh, no, now I'm fine to continue the policies of the current government, but just as it was in 2007, I think it would be in 2022 and beyond. Say something to get elected and then do exactly the opposite once you are there. Hence, Each Way Albo. Which one do you think is the real one? The one who's put his hands up and said, no, I don't support the policy, or because he lost that fight, oh, now I've completely changed my mind. And when it comes to borders, as I said, Kristina Keneally is now the one trying to tell us that they will continue to do everything the government currently does that has stopped this trade and stopped the deaths.
Yes, absolutely. Labor supports Operation Sovereign Borders and its three constituent parts: a regional resettlement, offshore processing, and turnbacks where safe to do so.
But there is a very big but. The temporary protection visas that effectively mean that there is a chance that many of the thousands of people who came here could still be deported from here, particularly if they ever got involved in criminal behaviour in this country, is an important metaphorical sword that hangs over their capacity to stay in the country. Well, the bit that was missing from the "we support everything, yes, absolutely, you can trust me, we're no different than the government," is that Labor is planning to change the temporary protection visas for, according to the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, about 30,000 people. They would make them effectively permanent residents. They would remove the metaphorical saw. They would also send a message that while it takes a while and it's not pleasant to sit in a detention centre, it's not pleasant to sit in a form of legal limbo, you can wait the system out. 30,000 people this decision would affect. Now, of course, Kristina Keneally and others would pretend that every single one of these 30,000 are the same as the family from Billawheeler in Queensland. That might be true, but it may not be too. But again, most importantly, it's not about the circumstances of those 30,000 people. It's about the message that you send to the next 30,000 people. Now, if you had a choice of going from a war-torn country, paying a fistful or a bagful of dollars and eventually getting to Australia, would you take it? Of course you would. Would you believe that advocates would gum up the system so that even if you failed refugee tests, you would eventually be able to stay here? Yes, you would. And if you knew that eventually a government would say, it's all too hard, then yes, you would. So forgive me if I don't believe Kristina Keneally, just as I didn't believe Kevin Rudd, or as I should more importantly say, because I believed Kevin Rudd, I don't believe Kristina Keneally. These things matter. National security matters. Our borders matter. And being consistent with a deterrent for people who seek to risk their own lives to breach those borders matters.